Well, good morning, everyone, and especially those international guests who have travelled great distances to be here today, the second event in this year's series. My name is Dr. Peter Mackenzie, and I am a Cadigal descendant, an elder from the saltwater Aboriginal community of La Perouse, here in our beautiful city of Sydney. And by the way, we put on a lovely day for you today for the finish of this program. On behalf of the current elders and community members, whose Cadigal forebears traditionally occupied this part of the Eora Nation of the Sydney Basin, I most warmly welcome you to this, our traditional saltwater country. The welcome to country is our contemporary interpretation of receiving visitors and new friends such as you, who may wish to visit areas within our traditional lands, or as we call it, country. It is a ceremony recognising the cultural and the spiritual connection to country, and an opportunity to reaffirm our ongoing relationship to our land, and in our case, the sea. The ceremony allows us to pay respect and to especially acknowledge our elders of all countries, all cultures, and all religions, and to reflect on our shared history and build a vision for a prosperous and a reconciled future. Aboriginal people sustained life on this continent for millennia without destroying Mother Earth. We hope that events like this one will help carry those admirable traditions. So again, we welcome you. On behalf of the memory of the long-lost Cadigal people of this Sydney area, we wish you a safe passage back to your homes today, secure in the knowledge, we hope, that you feel that you are made very welcome in this, our traditional country. Thank you. I'm Dr. Peter Mackenzie, and like our traditional boomerang, may you all return home safely. Thank you very much.
Please welcome your AWS host for today, Chief Technologist of Asia Pacific Japan, Olivier Klein.
Good morning, Sydney. Look at this room, wonderful. So many people, and I'm so excited for today because we have so many things to talk about. We really packed a lot of customer stories and interesting examples in the next 1.5 hours. Now, by the way, 5 years ago, I was on this same stage right here, and I made a prediction. I said machine learning is the new normal. And I think standing here and talking about artificial intelligence, I think I wasn't quite so wrong. The world is changing right in front of our eyes as we're speaking. You saw that video that was playing there just now? A good chunk of all that material was completely generated using generative artificial intelligence, specifically Leonardo.ai. But look, I think there will be kind of 3 different areas where we really will see this being extremely powerful. AI is already helping us to unleash that creativity and even create complete new businesses like Leonardo.ai. But it will also help us solve existing business problems, maybe make existing business processes a little bit more effective. Maybe even all the way down to a swimming pool, where milliseconds can actually mean that we might win a gold medal. And even completely reinvent other areas like genomics. So when we have to protect potentially rare species like this lovely little Tasmanian devil up here. But, how did we actually get here so fast? Or, well, did we actually get here so fast? It felt like a revolution, but I like to think of it as more of an evolution. And I think there were a few things that were at hand here. I mean, if we look back at the way we as humans interact with computer systems, there was progress there, and I'll take you through that in just a bit. The computational power that, thanks to cloud computing, is readily available, and some new techniques, such as transformers, which I will talk about in just a bit, really helped us to get there to this generative AI experience and this broader artificial intelligence. But let's go with that human and computer interaction for a second, shall we? I mean, I remember my first computer, right? Text-based, command line terminal, right? Just type something in. That's the starting point, right? Well, actually, before it was probably punch cards even, but that was slightly before my time. But from there, what came next? Graphical user interfaces. You remember the Windows 3.1 GUI? Minesweeper. I never won a game, by the way. I always bombed myself away. And then we looked into, well, if we store knowledge, how do we actually extract it effectively, especially in a connected world? And we came up with this idea of search engines. And we said, well, let's not stop there, but let's even bring it down into our hands, into our smartphones, that from everywhere in the world I can potentially access any kind of information at any point in time with an interface that is natural just using my hands. And we didn't stop there. We said, okay, well, what about voice, right? Remember this first little echo dot of the Alexa voice services? Having natural language understanding, of course, power to AI, to have these voice-led interactions, to where we are now, where we are even talking about AI-powered conversational searches. All right, but how do we get there specifically? You remember this one little paper that was published in 2017, Attention is All You Need, which actually was the precursor for what we now call transformers, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in just a bit. But the idea originally was, okay, can we create a scenario where we want to do AI translation of different languages, and traditionally you did it sequence to sequence with neural networks that were relatively connected to each other, and you said, what if we spread out the attention across a larger body of text, and by that we actually improve language translation? And then we found out, well, hey, actually that's quite useful if I take a lot of data and actually push it into a model. I get a pretty intelligent AI model suddenly out of it. So even though the original idea was translation, now this has led to this entire concept of generative AI. And so where are we today? Today we are at a state where lots of large language and large visual models are readily available for you, pre-trained by a variety of different companies, including AWS and others. We often refer to them as foundation models. And I would like to make one statement. I believe foundation models are table stakes. Everyone got access to the same technology out there. And by the way, that's our mission as AWS. We want to democratize this space. Everyone should get access to the latest and greatest foundation models out there in the generative AI space. But if you think about foundation models are pre-trained on existing data. Very often, a lot of these foundation models have been trained on large amount of common crawl of internet data out there, and Wikipedia and dictionaries and other data. But wouldn't it be better if I could also potentially bring in my data from my data lake, for my CRM system, for my ERP system? And I'd like to believe that this is where the value sits. This is where the competitive difference will lie of you using foundation models, but bringing in your data. But okay, let's have a closer look to this even further. So we often talk about these large language models, and that came out of this entire transformer story, predict my next word, and that allowed us to create great AI assistants that allow me to talk to them textually. But we didn't stop there. We used a transformer concept and put it into the visual element. And you have large visual models where you have, for example, a text-to-image, right? Or a text-to-video. Like I said, that intro video that you saw was basically created using a variety of text and then rendering images and putting them in the video, or even creating the video as such. But it becomes even more powerful if you combine both together. And now we're talking about multimodality or multimodal models, or generative AI models. And by the way, let me give you an example of this. Here we see Claude 3, which is actually able to do multimodal, so you can put in a picture and you can ask it the questions. By the way, last week I was in Paris. We had the Paris summit there, and I took a little run past the Seine. And you can see how you can bring intelligence here. What do I see in this picture? Someone in front of the Eiffel Tower. You know, what's the name of the river? It's the Seine. What's the name of the bridge? It's Pont d'Iéna. What's the man wearing? And now the AI model here contextually can both understand my picture, the visual elements, as much as what I'm actually talking to it, the textual elements, and combine both together, and over time contextually understand this even further. And this is how we drive real intelligence across many different modularities here. And you're going to say, okay, how is that useful? Well, take, for example, the e-commerce space. We recently announced and launched Amazon Rufus, where if you use the Amazon.com app, you can actually go to the search bar, and instead of just searching with keywords and products, you can ask it any kind of questions. You can say, you know, what's the difference between drip coffee and this Nespresso machine, for example? But it can also be contextually understanding it, right? So you can say, I have a 5-year-old son, he really likes dinosaurs. What would be some good or great birthday gifts that I can give to my son? And you can see how this completely transforms my e-commerce experience, right? I don't just put in a keyword and go to a long list and look at what other people bought. I basically just talk to a shopping assistant that now helps me find the right products. What if we don't stop there? You know, some products, it would be really great to see how they would look like on me or within my environment. Well, within our Amazon Science department, we created an open source project called Diffuse to Choose. And as the name indicated, it's actually an AI diffusion model, which allows you to, for example, take a picture of yourself and say, well, how would this T-shirt look on me? How would those jeans look on me? How would this blouse look on me? And it will render it accurately on top of you. And not just with bodies, right? You can even do it within an environment, like your living room here. Maybe this wonderful little white Chesterfield couch. How would it look like within my living room? Just take a picture and you render it on top of it. Again, transforming how we look at e-commerce and how we actually make these buying decisions as such. These are just few of many examples, and you're going to hear a lot more great customer stories in just a bit. Look, what's on the immediate horizon? I'm going to say 4 things here. First, bigger is not always better. Energy efficiency will become highly relevant, and we talk about sustainability elements later on and what we do there and other companies. Cultural awareness of these models, and to build so responsibly. Okay, let's start with bigger is not always better. Okay, why do I actually say that? When you think about these foundation models, they must be trained with data. We often refer to that as model size, or the amount of parameters that you feed this model in. We take like a GPT-3 in 2020, it was 175 billion, switch C at 1.6 trillion, right? And it's just exploding in terms of the parameters that we can feed these models with. But more data does not necessarily mean a better outcome or more intelligent model, and we already start seeing that. So the idea of just feeding it with more data, getting a more intelligent model, doesn't quite work out. And a good friend of mine, Jen Chu Scott, who's the founder of IN Capital, which is basically a VC arm that invests into an AI startup space in Hong Kong, she likes to compare this with a good analogy. She says, we don't get on Mars by building taller and taller buildings on Earth. And I think you can take that same analogy and saying, by just feeding models a lot more data, we will not achieve general artificial intelligence. And there's one other caveat with this. It's costly to train large models, and the more parameters you put in, the more energy you're going to consume. Training one of those most popular publicly available large language model uses the same amount of electricity than over 1.6 million hours worth watching of streaming material. That's about 15 years worth of TV streaming. That's a lot of Seinfeld episodes right there. And talking about that, I loved how you laughed at Seinfeld, because you're probably culturally aware of Seinfeld. That might not be the case everywhere. We will have more models that need to be trained for specific cultures, specific languages. The majority of foundation models out there have been trained of body of works or common crawls that is very often in English in a certain one culture. We already start seeing culturally aware models pop up in Singapore with Sea Lion in Korea and Japan, or with our latest partnership in this space for different kind of languages to really build culturally aware models. And then lastly, of course, how do we build this responsibly? I take it that everyone in the room by now is familiar with the word hallucinations of generative AI models, so basically dreaming up pieces of information that are actually not accurate. And so one of the techniques that is being looked at and already existing in most of the foundation models that you have right there, it can tell you where's the origin of that piece of information and what's the source. And by that, I can actually involve or have a human in the loop and have a human in the loop verification to understand this was maybe a hallucination, this isn't the right kind of piece of information that I should have gotten out of that model. But you can also chain models together. So instead of just having one model that's going to rule them all, wouldn't it be better to have one entry model that calls, depending on the context, calls other models and other models underneath? And some of these models might be statistical machine learning models. Some of these might just be even deterministic APIs, and that's how we want to think about those things. But look, I talked a lot about technology here, and I'd like to believe that the challenge is not just always technology, even though I am a technologist, it's very often also people and processes. And so one good idea here is, why don't we look a little bit in the past, and look at some of these technological innovations and industrial revolutions that we had. Maybe take that as a baseline to learn a little bit on how we go about this. And to help me do that, I'd like to introduce my first guest speaker here, Professor Generative, who's the Vice Chancellor and President from the Australian National University.
All right, are we ready to go? Backwards, just a little bit? Ollie's told you a tremendous amount about the world we find ourselves in and what's coming. I want to wind the clock back a little bit and talk about where we've been and why it still matters today. Which means I want to take you on a journey to the past. I want to tell you about a system that came before AI, that shaped AI and the worlds we all live in. I also want to begin, however, by acknowledging where we are today on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I want to join Dr. Mackenzie in acknowledging elders past and present of that nation and any other First Nations people in the room. And like him, I want to remind myself that we're on a journey from this moment in time, not only from acknowledgement and commitment to treaty, truth, and reconciliation, and that we stand on lands that was always sacred and never ceded. And for me, that's a hugely important part of thinking about how I do all of my work. And not that long ago, a long way from here, about 2,000 kilometers inland, so away from sea country, I came across this little tiny piece of a tree stump. It's about this big. It's on the side of a dirt road, and it was planted in place 151 years ago. So why is a little tiny piece of a dirty, very old cypress core relevant to the 21st century? Well, because that cypress stump came to form a part of a system. And that system starts even before that tree stump was planted in the ground in 1870. That system starts in the 1820s and the 1830s in the United Kingdom and the United States and France and Germany, where different kinds of scientists and engineers were making experiments. They worked out how to contain energy in a jar, how to make the first electrical systems using chemicals and water and copper plates. They worked out that if they could make electricity, they could send signals down the wire. And a very clever man in the United States worked out how to convert an idea about dots and dashes into a signal you could send down that wire. Our first binary, if you want to think about it that way. And then you have wires, and you have a way of communicating the information, and you make a network. And those first telegraph networks went everywhere, Australia and global. And then there is a moment in time when someone discovers a critical material, something called gutta percha. It's a rubber plant, grew in Malaysia. And what that gutta percha let you do was insulate the wire that is carrying those signals and drop them to the bottom of the ocean. And suddenly, You go from connecting in a country to connecting between continents. And you birth an entire global telecommunications revolution. You create new companies. Some we still recognize. Siemens starts by working out how to insulate copper wires and drop them to the bottom of the ocean. Cable and wireless, if you're old like me, owned half of those cables in the 19th century. And once you have a global network and a set of technologies that can connect, what do you be able to do? Well, you can send information all over the world. You can create new businesses. These networks help create the first news agencies, Reuters, AAP. There's a reason we call the newspaper the Daily Telegraph, because it came on the telegraph lines. They let places like the United States communicate in real time with Europe. But until 1870, Australia wasn't part of this network. If you wanted to get information from London to here in Sydney, you had to put it on a boat. And that boat had to go all the way around the world. And it took 45 days on the fastest boats with the wind behind you to get news from Adelaide or Sydney to London or in the other direction. And in 1870, a man named Charles Todd, who was a remarkable engineer in the great state of South Australia, did a deal with one of those big networking companies. And he said, I will drag a wire from Adelaide to Darwin if you meet me in Darwin with the submarine cables, and we'll connect the planet. This was a fairly significant engineering feat. That meant 3,200 kilometers had to be surveyed and plumbed. They had to dig a post hole every 80 meters and bury a post and then connect them all with a single piece of wire. It took 22 months. They got it done. Every single one of those orange dots represents a place where they had to put a power generating station and the people who ran it. And those people were experts in Morse code, in telegraphy, in managing batteries. They stayed awake 24/7 because the news is coming down the wire all the time and going back and forwards in it. And in the moment when this system connects in October 1872, it goes from taking 44 days on the fastest ship with the wind behind you to 7 hours, 36 pairs of hands. And you want to guess what the first things Australians do with this? We might have bet on ponies. We might have been interested in the cricket. We might have worked out how to trade wool faster. But we also became part of a global network. And it changed the way we thought about time and distance. We built new companies. We built new ways of thinking about things. We had to have new laws around copyright, around privacy, around data and security. But like Ollie said, it was never just the technology, right? It was also the people. You needed those expert workers in all those little power stations, but you also needed a work crew to maintain the line. Those little tiny tree stumps got that way because they got eaten by white ants and caught fire and fell over in windstorms. And so you had to have a crew working that line every day, every week, every year. You also had to have a supply chain, because it turns out, if you think about where some of those dots were in the middle of Australia, it's a long way from most things. Sacred Aboriginal country, absolutely. On a European supply chain, not terribly often. So if you wanted copper sulfate or new glass jars to put them in, or the latest manual on how to run a telegraph network, it had to come from somewhere. And it came on a supply chain, powered by camels and cameleers, moving on long, slow distribution networks. But you needed those distribution networks to keep the tech functioning. And when you had all of that, technology, workers, carers, people who maintain the network, a supply chain, you create a whole system. And when you have that whole system, not only does it do the work it was supposed to do, keep Australia connected, share information, create the difference between communication and transportation and information that could flow down the line, you also have unintended and unexpected consequences. For those of you who are from Australia, one of the most used apps on your mobile phone is from the Bureau of Meteorology. If you're not from Australia, you will find the way we talk about the bomb confusing. You will. That app gets part of its start from this telegraph network. It's an unexpected consequence of networking the country, is you create a series of hubs that talk to each other all the time. And one of the things they talked about wasn't just the messages that passed through, but the weather in each site. And so that first telecommunications network made the first weather maps. And those first weather maps accumulated over time suddenly made it clear that if it rained in Eucla on a Tuesday, it would rain in Renmark 3 days later. So telegraphy let us discover the weather. Not what they thought they were going to do, and an unexpected consequence. Today, telegraphy still shapes how we do things in Australia. My colleague and I took this photo from a drone just south of a town in South Australia. You can read the lines across, starting on the far, left-hand side, is where the telegraph line would have been, followed by the rail, followed by electricity, followed by the NBN and the road. It turns out each one of those technologies has layered on top of the others, partly because land had been cleared, partly because telegraphy and railway required water, so we put the lines close to that. Turns out while telegraphy and railway likes water, the NBN and the roads don't. And so the choices we made in the 1870s that shape the world we live in today have complicated resonances and complicated challenges. Over the arc of today, you'll hear an enormous amount about artificial intelligence and about the worlds we are building. What I hope you will take from this little tiny snapshot of our history is a reminder that the choices we make today will frame countless decades and even centuries from this moment forward. And the second piece is that while we talk a lot about the technology, none of these systems will ever be possible without all the human beings that hold them together, that make them work, and their lives are as important as the technology itself. So with that, I'll say stop and say thank you.
Thank you, Genevieve. I really like how you articulate this, and we think about just throwing down a copper line in the ocean, and suddenly we transform completely how we do things and create complete new businesses and companies. And people maybe settle in complete different locations potentially just because of this new technology. And I like this unintended consequences, right? Who would have thought that I can actually produce a weather map across a region where it normally takes me days to potentially travel? Well, now I can do a daily weather map because of the telegraph. And I like to think that that analogy to that paper that I just showed you earlier, attention is all you need, is maybe that original starting point where we already start seeing these unintended or unexpected consequences of suddenly having wonderful generative AI models. But it also dramatically transforms the way we operate, we work, and I think it has an impact on all of us, a very positive productivity impact in the way we actually work. And so talking about work, I want to introduce one of our next speakers, Don Price, who's the Chief Work Futurist at Atlassian, to talk us through this.
Good morning. How you all doing? That's bad. Well, let's try again and pretend you're awake. Good morning. How you all doing? Much better. That is the last interaction, so don't fear. Thank you for a warm welcome today. By way of introduction, I am Don Price, as Ollie mentioned, and I'm a work futurist. It is a completely made-up job, or at least it was before the pandemic, when everything became real again. Now, as well as being a work futurist in a technology company, I have another very important role. And it's a role I think is quite important when I think about generation AI. It's my role as a parent. These are my twin boys, Frankie and Cooper. In fact, I got married on, so they saved the applause for later, but my wife is also in the audience. And I was thinking about this when I was thinking about this talk, is we can think about generation AI and the impacts of technology, but how are we thinking about the impacts on society, right? On all of you in the room. I think it's why you're here today. And so when the team asked me to do this talk, I'm like, I'm going to talk a little bit about the future of work, but I want you to think about this through the lens of being a human. It could be that you're a parent, a teammate, a leader. You can be in any role that you want, but think about this in your role as a human. So late last year, I was doing an event. Part of my role at Atlassian is I get to spend half my time outside the organization in companies like yours. Some of them a little bit broken, some of them struggling through change. And I started to document over the years something that I've called the Modern Work Manifesto. Now, it might sound a bit weird. Work futurist, modern work. Which one are you, mate? I'm both. Because when I think about the future, I love to dream about what the future can do for us. But there's no point dreaming if we don't confront the reality of how we work today, a reality that many of us are avoiding. So in spending time with large enterprises, government, institutions of all shapes and sizes, I came up with a red thread, some similarities between these organizations that I want to share with you today through the lens of generation AI. The first part of the Modern Work Manifesto is context over content. AI might make this a hell of a lot worse. Does anyone want more content? Where are you? There's some sick people in the room somewhere. None of us do, but we are thrust upon and sent huge amounts of content on a daily basis. The thing we really want is context. What's the decision I should make? What's the next action I should take? Who should I be talking to? Where should I escalate? Where should I intervene? And where should I stay away? We're all craving context, but we've been given content. I remember last year seeing one of my first demos of AI. Someone said, you can write 4 bullet points, it will turn it into a long-form email, and then AI will turn the long-form email back into 4 bullet points. It's a complete waste of time if we don't understand why we're trying to do this. So the first thing that I ask you to think about is, what context do you need in your role, and how does that help you be more effective? You'll notice I didn't use the word productive. We'll come on to that later. The next area I want to talk to you about after context over content is evolution over transformation. Now, Ollie's a good friend, so I don't want to put him down, but I think we've got carried away by transformation in the last 10, 15, 20 years. In my role, I've seen culture transformation, digital transformation, agile transformation. Anyone in the room gone through a transformation in the last 10 years? You all have. And so is that relevant for right now? Well, I think it is. I think we need to think about the long game. But evolution is, how can we explore and experiment? How can we take some of the tech that Ollie showed you, or other organizations are going to show you, and go, how do I play with that? How do I experiment? How might I use that? And how do we do this in small, manageable chunks? I think our victory here is doing this 1 week at a time, 1 degree at a time. If any of you have already spent $40 million on an AI transformation, I'm sorry, it might not work. Because we don't know the answer. So instead of transforming to this end state, how do we instead think about how we evolve and embrace today? The third area is my favorite, flow over silos. Virtually every business I work with is heavily siloed. The organization chart dictates how they work. And I ask leaders, how do you create value? And they go, oh, that way, horizontally across the organization. I think Generation AI can help us get flow. It can help us understand who are the people we should be working with left and right, and how do we deliver value to our customers, not how do I just do this in my silo. I think I've already seen this in some organizations. Some organizations where the marketing team are playing with AI, and so are the technology team, and the IT team, and so are sales. The only people that aren't are legal. But everyone's playing with AI, but are you doing it to get flow across the organization or for your own benefit? And where does the customer sit in that flow? It's a question we should all be asking. The fourth area is about better over bigger. So many organizations I've worked with in the last few years, they got big. They'll tell you how many employees they've got. They'll even tell you how many customers they've got. But the real question is, are those customers happy? The real question is, are the staff that they have, are they engaged? Are they motivated? Not how many do you have, but how are they performing? Better is about scaling gracefully. AI should enable us to scale gracefully, but we need to know why we're doing what we're doing first in order to get that. Otherwise, we've all got bigger, but I don't think any of us actually wanted that. The fifth area is probably also one of my favorites, outcomes over outputs. If I could eradicate any word from the business language right now, it would be the word productivity. I think we've not understood the byproduct of productivity around mental health and wellness and burnout. Productivity was invented in the era that Generative was just talking about. We have moved on from that era. And when we think about AI, instead of saying, if I roll out AI today, I can be more productive, how can we instead say I can be more effective? How can I instead say, I'm going to impact society, business, the world as a whole? I'm going to make everyone's lives better. Outputs is just how busy you were this week, how many things you moved along. 2 very quick stories. A CTO of a very large financial institution that I work with said to me recently they'd rolled out some AI and they'd saved 25% of their staff's time in rolling out AI. I was like, that's amazing. He's like, no, we had a 40% increase in meetings. We saved time and we spent it on the lowest value thing we could. Like, humans are kind of weird. We fill the gap. So they hadn't got more productive. In fact, they got less productive. They were spending time in mindless meetings. That's not the way we want to do it. Second example, a chap I met who runs call centers. In Australia alone, he has 70,000 staff members. And he shared with me recently that he's worked out that current technology that exists today, he can save 50%, 50% of his team's workload. That's great if we care about profit. But who's caring about the 35,000 people he employs that might not retrain to be a graphical user interface designer, or may not be an experience lead, or may not be a work futurist? How are we actually caring about the impact on society? So when we think about generation AI over the long term, we need to really care about the impact, not just on ourselves, but on others. And that's going to take us to be selfless, not selfish. The next area is all about adaptability over adherence. I work a lot in industries that are highly regulated, and I understand the challenges. All right? In the financial sector, we had a huge Royal Commission. We had the impact of the pandemic. There is stuff going on that makes your life hard. But we're not going to roll out artificial intelligence and get the resilience and the challenge we want from it by writing a policy. We need to do it by exploring and experimenting. Adaptability, it means that we go and try stuff. Most leaders I work with tell me that what they really want is learning velocity. They want a learning organization, an organization that takes an insight, applies that insight, and does something with it. But then they create policy and process that says you must comply with a certain way of working. If you don't do it, someone else will. So you've got to find a way of being adaptable. The penultimate area is all about team over individual. And this has a couple of lenses. One is basically AI is going to become our teammate. In our generation, AI isn't going to be something that we operate. Right now, we are the human in the loop. But very soon, if not already, AI will operate around us as a teammate. How do we understand the concept of technology as a teammate, not something that we control? But also, how do we understand the fact that this has to be a team effort? Every transformation I've seen in the last 10 years been led by a CIO. AI transformation will be led by you. And the final area is vocation over location. In my lifetime, work was where you worked, the office. This concept of the Industrial Revolution left over of a physical, concrete space where we all hang out together. And that's gone. Right now, it's less about where you work, and it's more about how you work. And we have to challenge ourselves to understand how can AI help us with asynchronous communication with products like Loom? How can it help us with our meetings, with the fact that we work in distributed teams all over the world, that you have teammates with different customs, cultures, and locations? AI can do that if we embrace it and we experiment and explore. So whilst I want you today to get carried away by what the future might hold, and Amazon and AWS and Ollie and the team will show you some amazing technology and help you think about that potential, the real challenge is I want you to confront the reality that you are in today and ask yourself the question. Whether it be as a parent, or as a team leader, or as a human, or as a partner, ask yourself the question, how can I explore, experiment, and embrace this, and how can I unleash my potential? And I think if you do that, we can all create a better future. Thank you very much.
Excellent presentation. Thank you, Dom. I think it's really that idea of generation AI, right? The new generation that we're entering, where artificial intelligence is something that we embrace, but that really helps us as people to be more creative, more productive, etc. And look, I think if we look at that modern work manifesto, we might think, okay, that's, over the location, maybe in my laptop at home, or maybe it's me sitting at the desk, somewhere in my office. But it doesn't just stop there. What if we bring some of these learnings of machine learning, data, and artificial intelligence into sports? Could we maybe improve the performance of athletes? And so I think it would be really nice to hear from Swimming Australia and how they make use of data, machine learning, computer vision, and artificial intelligence to improve the performance of their athletes. So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce the next speaker, Jess Coronis, who is the General Manager of Performance Insights and the Olympic Campaign Lead of Swimming Australia.
There's nothing in this finish. The Australian dives to the wall, and he's the world champion. Ariane Timbers has pulled away and completely dominated for Goss in world record time. Lizzie Deckers in an inspired swim. Kaylee, she's digging in for the fight. She's the greatest we've seen, and she's the undisputed backstroke champion of the world. Come on, Molly, stretch out. She's world record. Amazing. What a finish, what a race. More relay gold and a world record for the nation's darlings. McAvoy flying away. The revival is complete. Cam McAvoy is a world champion at 29. Molly's coming. Molly over the top. Molly O'Callaghan taken the world by storm.
Hi, my name's Jess Karunis, General Manager of Performance Support and Olympic Campaign at Swimming Australia. Today we're 8 weeks away from the start of the Australian Swimming Olympic Trials and 15 weeks out from the start of the 2024 Paris Olympic Games. This is an incredibly busy time of year for us. The swimmers are training 6 days a week, up to 8 hours a day, swimming hundreds of kilometres in the pool every month to try and qualify for that team to go to Paris. The pressure is on, but the Dolphins will leave no stone unturned in their preparations. At Swimming Australia, we're athlete-focused, coach-led, and expert-supported. We have incredible swimmers, some of the world's fastest, world-leading coaches and performance staff. We have an innovation program, and we've developed a performance insights team. We're using data models, machine learning, and predictive analytics for performance insights so that our coaches can make better coaching decisions. Using their coach's eye and coaching experience and supporting this with data, this is called the art and science of coaching. We started working with AWS in 2018. And we're trying things that have never been done in world swimming before in our quest for gold. We've been developing insight applications for our coaches and sports scientists to allow them to collaborate to design bespoke training programs for each individual athlete. And it's working. At the 2021 Tokyo Olympics saw Australia's most successful Olympic swimming team ever, winning 9 Olympic gold medals. We moved to number 1 in the world at the most recent 2023 World Championships in Fukuoka, winning 13 gold. Let me tell you, there's nothing like 13 gold to validate your data strategy. Our race analysis system is called Sparta, and we've custom built this. So we have to continue to improve it, making sure that we're using every new technology that's available. The annotations used to be done manually, and this would take hours. Now Sparta uses machine learning and computer vision to significantly speed up this process. With the ability to analyse and track all 8 swimmers in the pool, we can measure things like distance per stroke, stroke rate, and continual velocity, just to name a few of the outputs. This data is critical to us to understand how each athlete is executing a race. And we've been able to analyse not just the Australian swimmers, but the international swimmers as well, giving us a competitive edge. We can do this at a speed and detail that no other country in the world can currently do. The first application that we built using that race analysis data was called our Relay app. A relay race isn't just about selecting the 4 fastest swimmers, as you may think, and swimming them in that order. There's a lot of strategy that goes into team selection. The Relay app will help coaches model different performances and race scenarios. It provides insight into possible and probable teams that other countries may enter. The model will consider such things as the age of the swimmer, their current form, and their ability to do relay changeovers. These are calculations that we can't do longhand in the speed that we need the answers between the heats races and the finals races. The athletes are the champions, and it is their performance that produces the win. Have no doubt about that. But it is our role to put them in a position to win by selecting the best strategy and team on the day. And as you know, technology can quite literally be a game changer. We used the Relay app for the first time in an international competition at the Tokyo Olympics, and Australia won the most relay medals there, winning medals in 5 out of 6 relay events. Then in Fukuoka last year at the World Championships, we won a medal in every single relay event, proving again to be the most successful relay country in the world. Right now, on the big screen here, you are looking at the most successful relay team in world history, the Australian women's 4x100 metre relay team. I'm going to share a quick anecdote with you. Right before a swim meet in Vegas, before one of the relay meets, a radio message came to me from our media manager, Kate. She was desperate to know what the app was predicting. She asked me, "Jess, what does Jeff Bezos say? Are we going to win today?" Since then, when talking about our data, I'm often asked, "What does Jeff say?" And I love this, because it shows the transformation that coaches and athletes have gone through, and now that how comfortable they are with technology, and how that we've evolved into a sports culture that embraces innovation. We want to be the Formula One of Olympic sport. Just like F1 teams have their car garages, we have our training pools, and this is where we practice and refine performance. We created a web portal called Lane 4. This was designed by our coaches for our coaches to give them quick and easy access to any of the data reports they needed, when and where they needed them most, on the pool deck. This tool becomes personalised as the coach selects their favourite reports. People will often ask me, when is this all going to be finished? I don't think it will ever be finished. As we complete different projects and products, there are always new ones to be done. Our aspiration is to be the best in the world at what we do, both in and out of the pool, to continually improve and to lead through innovation. Our current project that we have underway is called Training Insights. It's about bringing the power of real-time analysis and generative AI into those training pools. The training pools can be our most challenging environments. Swimmers sharing multiple lanes, swimming different drills, and the coaches being on the side of the pool deck yelling stroke rates and times at them from their stopwatches. It's a much harder place to accurately measure and compute what is happening in real time. If you think about it, there's a lot more to come for our coaches too. We designed Lane 4 using Amazon QuickSight, and now there's Amazon Q. Our coaches are not tech people. We don't want them to be. We want them to remain world-leading coaches. But Amazon Q is going to enable them to query the data using their natural language. Right now, our single-minded focus is on those Paris Olympic Games. But we will always have one eye on the future, to stay ahead of the game, to have sustained success. So we are looking on to LA in 2028 and to Brisbane in 2032, which will be a home Olympic Games for us. To be able to use all the technology that's available to us, to innovate and iterate, and to continue to work with the athletes to be the best that they can be. I hope that you'll all watch the Dolphins in Paris and think back to today, as you've now all got a little bit of insight into what goes on behind the scenes. High-performance swimming is a global race. You know the goal is to win gold, as many gold as we can possibly win. Everyone wants to be the #1 swimming nation. You must continue to innovate and improve, and that will never stop. This is our race to the moon. Thank you.
What an awesome story. And I love how when we talk about generation AI here, it's across every industries. It's across all the different people coming from all kinds of different backgrounds that make use of data, machine learning, and AI to improve what they are doing. But I think it's time to switch gears a little bit, switch it up into a different dimension here. We focused a lot on people, I want to say. So let's focus a little bit on how we could maybe make use of artificial intelligence to generate a better future for ourselves, and maybe also for our future generations, and especially also our planet. So next up, we want to talk a little bit about sustainability and renewable energies, and how artificial intelligence, data, and machine learning can help us to achieve some of those things. And so to kick that off, we have Kate Vidgen from Macquarie Asset Management.
So, I want to start today with a simple truth about the energy transition. We all know that people have differing opinions about the energy transition. But there is one thing that we all seem to agree on. It is going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult because we need to decarbonise everything all at once. We cannot decarbonise only part of the world. It's going to be difficult because climate science tells us that we need all industries to decarbonise at the same time. This will be like an industrial revolution on steroids. It's going to be difficult because of the sheer weight of capital required. $4 trillion per annum needs to be spent by 2030 to meet our goals. And it's going to be difficult because the physical build is almost inconceivable. Let's take electrification. We need to build 50 million kilometres of transmission lines by 2040. That's a third of the way to the sun. However, even if it's going to be difficult, we need to remain optimistic. Human ability to adapt and ingenuity will surprise us. We have actually made massive transformations before. Post-World War II, the US decided to put in place an infrastructure program to stimulate employment. The infrastructure backbone that was built became the backbone for success for the next 50 years for that country. So we can do it again. And look, we're already having momentum. Climate finance for clean energy is up 60% since 2020. 1 in 5 cars now sold globally will be electric. And this year we'll set a record for installed renewable energy capacity. The output will be equivalent to that of both China and the US combined. And we're already exceeding our own forecasts with our ability to innovate at scale. In the last 15 years, solar generation technology has dropped in cost by more than 90%. This would have been inconceivable only a decade ago. 5 years ago, the concept of pulling CO2 from the air with giant fans and, believe it, filters, and storing it underground would have been seen to be science fiction. But last year, the US Department of Energy committed billions of dollars to a technology that does just that, direct air capture. And AI? AI will be a game changer. The problem we have with renewable energy is it's intermittent. What AI will do is help us match real-time supply with demand. So when the sun shines and the wind blows, hopefully we'll be able to use the energy we generate. And in the short term, AI will be really important to data centre sustainability. Data centres will be able to use AI to become more efficient by being able to predict, monitor, and then manage their energy load. However, as you can see, AI applications are a lot more power hungry than their predecessors. This is a challenge we're only just starting to get our heads around and be able to manage. And it's not the only challenge. We have a long way to go in a decreasing window of time. So what are companies doing in this difficult environment? Let me take my own organisation, Macquarie Group. We've been involved in the energy transition for almost 2 decades. Our first activities were in 2005. We started with wind and solar projects, moved to batteries and storage, then EVs, and today we're looking at much more complex products like sustainable aviation fuel and green ammonia, which help us decarbonise industries that are hard to get at. Across the world, we have nearly 105 gigawatts in development, construction and operation. This is actually more than double Australia's installed capacity. And we pursued this opportunity with vigour because we saw it as almost the greatest opportunity of our times to connect global capital and social need. And along the way, we've actually discovered that a green purpose is really important to our people. It's helped us attract and retain new and exciting talent. So what have we learned in almost 2 decades in the industry? Well, we've learned a lot. There's a few things that stand out. Lesson number 1 for us is that we need to adapt, learn, and then adapt again. The energy transition won't go in a straight line. It's subject to macro factors that we can't forecast, let alone control. There could be, in the next couple of decades, major technology breakthroughs that change the course of decarbonisation. At the moment, we've actually got countries putting satellites up, trying to capture 24/7 extraterrestrial solar power that they hope to laser beam back to Earth. Is that going to happen? Maybe. But even more modest technological change, it's hard to predict. And then we have geopolitics. We saw with the Ukraine crisis that a political event can change the course of energy markets permanently. In that case, the EU surprised the world by reducing their reliance on Russian gas through energy efficiency and more renewable energy. So corporates cannot, in their strategy and investment focus, remain static. We need to assess the direction of travel, adapt, and then move forward with momentum. Our second lesson has been around collective intelligence. Energy systems are complex. In the future, we're going to need multi-parties to get together and create whole new value chains in a decarbonised world. An example of this is actually sustainable aviation fuel. You can make that out of used cooking oil. Yes, we may be flying around on olive oil in the future. But in order to do that, you need to collect the oil from restaurants and food processing centres. You need to refine it centrally using very complex chemical and manufacturing processes. You need access to tightly held airport infrastructure, and then you need the airlines to use it to decarbonise. Creating these new value chains will require a high level of trust, and we need to learn quickly and collectively. And our final lesson? Well, our final lesson is that actually no one can traverse this alone. If you need collective intelligence and you need to move at speed, we will need to have partnerships as the bedrock to our success. And the very best partnerships are repeatable. They give you speed to market and efficiency via repetition. A good example of this is the partnership between Macquarie and AWS, which has been in place since 2014. We have a strategic framework where we've collated the agreements between ourselves, but it also supports our mutual commitment to meeting net zero. We tried a range of things. We've even looked at solar and wind in India. That's a nascent market, and it's not been without its challenges, but we've embraced them. The real thing that's come about is a deep and genuine admiration of our mutual commitment to accelerating decarbonisation. And Macquarie was also one of the first parties to join Amazon's climate pledge. This seeks commitments to net zero by 2040. The pledge brings together some of the world's largest organisations to accelerate joint action, cross-sector collaboration, and responsible change. We will need multinationals in the energy transition because, as I said at the outset, we cannot decarbonise only part of the world. But in summary, it's not only large organisations that are going to have to move quickly. It's large and small organisations who are going to have to change. Those who can adapt and use collective intelligence in partnerships are the most likely to succeed. So why is this relevant to you? Because actually true success is going to depend on the determination of both you and I to move forward with the energy transition and to not see it as a threat, to see it as an opportunity. Thank you.
Excellent. And Kate talked about the climate pledge. So let's dive in a little bit. Climate pledge, the idea of reaching the Paris Agreement 10 years early. What do we within Amazon actually do here? Well, there are a few obvious things. Think about one of our core businesses, retail, shipping out packages. Can we use machine learning, the data that we have, to potentially reduce packaging sizes? Yes, we can. And we saved over 2 million tons of packaging material that was avoided since 2015. Over 40,000 tons of plastic avoided globally since 2020. And more importantly, 41% less average packaging weight thanks to these machine learning models. Of course, reducing the amount of weight, reducing the amount of carbon emissions when we deliver and ship a package, especially also on the last mile delivery. Right? How can we decarbonize Amazon's transportation network? If we think about the last mile delivery, maybe we can use electric vehicles. We now have 9,000 custom electric delivery vans rolled out already and more to come, even e-cargo bikes and even e-rickshaws. How cool is that? But if you think about electric vehicles, the first question you must ask is, where's that energy actually coming from? So Amazon continues to increase their renewable energy use by investing into infrastructure, by investing into Amazon solar farms and wind farms. And we are now the #1 corporate purchaser of renewable energy in the world. And 90% of all the electricity consumed in 2022 was from renewable energy sources across all of Amazon. And by the way, we are already 5 years ahead of the target, so that by next year, we expect to be 100% on renewable energy across all of Amazon. Now, that's a lot of investment into infrastructure right here on planet Earth. But what about space? Why don't we invest some infrastructure there? So I'd like to introduce my next speaker, Hannah Williams, to talk us a little bit through Project Kuiper.
Status check. Go Atlas. Go Centaur. Go Kuiper.
3, 2, 1. We have ignition and liftoff.
Copy that, Proto 1. We got contact with both satellites. Huge milestone.
Right here in the Asia Pacific and Japan region, we estimate that there are 500 million people who still don't have equitable access to connectivity, and 10% of Australians are still digitally excluded, which means that they don't have equitable access to education, financial inclusion, healthcare, and basic government services. For those of you who may be hearing the name Kuiper for the first time, Project Kuiper is an initiative to increase global connectivity through a constellation of 3,236 satellites in low Earth orbit. Our mission: to deliver fast, affordable connectivity to unserved and underserved communities and businesses around the world. That video that you just saw, that was 5 years of innovation and work in 50 seconds. And that was real, actual footage from the 2023 launch of our first 2 Kuiper prototype satellites. Right now, those satellites are orbiting the Earth's surface at 27,000 kilometers per hour. Let's talk more about that mission. It's an incredible story. We refer to it as our proto-flight mission because we were flying our first 2 prototype satellites, KuiperSat-1 and KuiperSat-2. We had done extensive testing on the ground, but this was our first opportunity to see how our satellites performed in their natural habitat, outer space. On October 6th, our satellites boarded a ULA Atlas V rocket and launched into space from Cape Canaveral. The rockets released our satellites right where we wanted them, 500 kilometers above Earth's surface. From then on, it was up to us. We made our first contact 30 minutes later as the satellites passed over Mauritius. KuiperSat-1 and KuiperSat-2 were alive, and the data, it just came flooding in. In space lingo, everything was nominal. A few hours into our mission, we got our first ever shot from the space selfie cam. You can see our extended solar array and the Hawaiian Islands just below, but we still had a lot to get done. We spent the next few weeks successfully testing everything on board, from propulsion systems to solar arrays, flight computers to star trackers.
Backroom, this is McAllen.
Our final test came, and 3 of our engineers set up in the car park just outside of our test site in Texas.
We have two-way.
We are getting internet traffic.
We streamed a 4K video on Amazon Prime.
Andrew is executing the demo.
And of course, the worst thing that could happen, well, it did happen.
Right on
It started
cue,
raining.
The heavens have opened up a little bit. And
The team put a tarp up, went ahead anyway, and the results, well, they speak for themselves.
Contact is starting now.
We have
Switch
two-way.
over. We have two-way.
All right, confirmed. We have internet access via
They
the
also placed the first ever Amazon order on the Kuiper network. And guess what they bought? Rocket launchers. Of course.
And Andrew just completed the first successful purchase from.
We also conducted an Amazon chime call. Pretty cool.
We have two-way.
All right, we have internet access via the Kuiper network. Joining the meeting. All right, cool. Flight, this is McAllen.
And thankfully, that package arrived at Amazon HQ the very next day. A big thank you to the Amazon teams for fulfilling that order. So, what does it take to launch Kuiper? Our satellite network has 3 main parts. Our satellite constellation, with more than 3,200 satellites in low Earth orbit, providing enough coverage to reach around 95% of people on planet Earth, and reaching projected latency speeds of 30 to 50 milliseconds round trip. Secondly, one of our most important inventions, the customer terminal. Our customer terminal comes in 3 flavors. Our standard antenna, which is 23 centimeters wide, and our larger Pro terminal, which will serve our most demanding enterprise and government customers. However, I am most excited about shrinking all of that technology into our smallest terminal. It's about the size of a Kindle, making it our most affordable and our most portable model. Thirdly, our ground infrastructure. We're manufacturing and installing hundreds of sites around the world and right here in Australia and New Zealand. Each gateway connects via fiber link directly to AWS infrastructure and from there to the internet, enabling secure, encrypted links between Kuiper and AWS. One of my favorite features of our system are our inter-optical satellite links, aka space lasers. With this technology, we can send data at the speed of light between satellites in our constellation, and it lets us operate as a mesh network in space, and it's incredibly difficult to pull off. Our private connectivity service, announced at Amazon re:Invent on November 2023, allows enterprise and public sector customers to securely connect any site served by Project Kuiper directly to their AWS cloud without ever touching the public internet. We believe that this will have a far-reaching impact to governments and enterprises across the globe. But Kuiper will serve all types of customers: supply chains and manufacturing sites, schools and their students, hospitals and their patients, fly-in and fly-out workers with their loved ones, emergency responders and disaster relief efforts, financial institutions and their businesses and their customers around the world. There is so much incredible technology packed into this system that is built to be high performance, enterprise grade, and secure by design. We've secured a record-breaking 80 rockets to launch our constellation, and we're preparing to build up to 5 satellites per day. Our first full-scale rocket launch is scheduled for this winter, with many more launches to follow. Once we have enough satellites in orbit, we will offer demonstrations to commercial customers. One of the first sites globally to offer demonstrations will be right here in Australia. Australia will be one of the first countries globally to benefit from Kuiper connectivity, and my team couldn't be more excited to work with you all. Our upcoming goals, yes, they are ambitious, but we have an incredible team in place, including right here in Australia and New Zealand. Together, Amazon and AWS have the infrastructure, the resources to deliver on our mission. Kuiper is a big bet for Amazon. I am inspired by that mission. I believe that Kuiper will have a global impact and make a real difference for all people, no matter who you are, where you are from, or where you live. Thank you. Now let me introduce Bronwyn Dodd, a proud Ngarrindjeri woman. She is the National General Manager for Indigenous Banking at the Westpac Group. She will share how Westpac will drive change across Australia in supporting financial inclusion for First Nations people by using innovative technology powered by Amazon.
Well, Menengrid population is around over 2,000 people and 14 different language groups from all over. I don't know, maybe Menengrid is a very special place and that's why they keep coming back here.
I reckon the people and the knowledge that they have carried for thousands of years, the culture is very big here. You can't beat the fishing. My role here is the financial advisor. I help at money management, serving the community, helping them with banks.
Good morning. First, please allow me to thank Dr. Peter McKenzie this morning for his amazing welcome. Today, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people. They protect this land that allow you and I to be here. I feel extremely privileged to be welcomed by them. Today, I'd also like to pay my respects to those that identify here as Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples and those online. Today, I represent us, but please know I do this with the utmost respect to you and your people. I have the privilege to share these stories and to work for Westpac to make change for my people. Having the opportunity to work with Project Kuiper has been amazing, and trust me, I thought, how does a bank work with satellites? I was extremely challenged at the beginning, and I have to say, when I had the conversations with Project Kuiper, I think it was different for them too. But today, 6 months later, our conversations are deep, and it's super exciting. Our communities, there's anywhere between 400 and 500 that we know, and I suspect there's many, many more that we will start to learn about. But that is our world. They are the oldest living culture in this world, something I'm extremely proud to be part of. Did you know that 14.5% of my people live in rural and remote areas like you just saw? 84 of us live in metro areas, but please know that it doesn't make us any different where we live. The really interesting thing for me, and where this greater opportunity is, that the median age of my people is 21 years old. The median age of others outside of Aboriginal culture is 37. 50% of my people are less than 25 years old. Can you imagine what we could do for that and the future of my people if we had things So I ask you to think along the way, what if? What if this was possible? It's not possible without the knowledge and education of what it will mean for my people, and that's where we're going to start. It's also important, and I appreciate there'll be many of you that do know these things, and unfortunately time doesn't allow me to go deep into history. We know many parts of it. But there's some historical impacts that do impact my people and our ability to be inclusive, not just in the financial industry, but in many industries. You know, many of you know, we were removed from home and family. That has created lifelong impacts and continues to do so in services that you and I probably commonly have. Did you know that we only became socially recognised in 1967? It was only 57 years ago that my people were given the, allowance to go and vote. Vote for the things that change public policy in this world, things that should have been us at the table very, very long time ago. You'll often hear the word self-determination when it's aligned to First Nations peoples. Self-determination for us is not an option, it's our right. Our right to be inclusive, our right to share what's right for our people. But all too often, it's you people that are trying to solve our problems, not ask or talk to us. So self-determination to us is for the wider world to listen to what's important to us and learn who we are. Unfortunately, some of those things have created financial challenges for my people. It does drive poorer social economic outcomes. And again, time doesn't allow me to go into those. But if I talk from a financial industry perspective, which is why Project Kaifa and Westpac are going to see the opportunities and work with our First Nations peoples to see if it's possible. If you look here, 75% of my people are excluded from mainstream financial services. What does that mean? If you're fully excluded, you don't have a financial services product. If you're severely excluded, you only have one product. So my people fit 75% in that. They're lucky if they've got one bank account. Can you imagine if you only had one bank account? No credit card, no home loan, no shares? We don't. Some of us do, but majority of my people haven't had that ability to create that opportunity. 25% face the perpetration of people that are effectively taking our money because they see the vulnerability in us. We're not vulnerable people. We know what we need and we know what we want. We just need access. We need to be made inclusive. And unfortunately, 50% will experience financial hardship. And I know we're not alone as a culture for that. But it is really important when you look at how many of us are still living, 50% are deemed to have a challenge in financials. That's not okay. All of those things I've shared do create a lack of trust. We've had so many promises. We've had so many failures. So for me, my message when I work with the opportunity of Project Kaifa is to don't make promises that we can't commit to, because my people don't need that anymore. We've got to build trust. We have to learn. We have to engage. And that's what we will do in this, is we will build the trust with our people to make sure this is the right thing. Many of you will know banking is changing. It's going to be digital. I have no doubt most of you do all your banking online. We have some wonderful applications to do that. But it is different. Most of my people feel that maybe it's easier to go into a branch, because we don't have the options. You will see here, in Bullalula, 11 hours drive from Darwin, 14 from Alice, and 76% of that community are Indigenous. I just shared the facts that possibly they only have one bank account. And in addition, our people have challenges with identification to what the regulators or what the real world require. We all need a 100-point identification. Some of my people don't even have a birth certificate. How does that work? How does my industry create those opportunities to make sure that we're not excluded? So this is it. We are changing. So we need to think, what if we had the support of Project Kaifa to make a difference? So my people didn't feel they had to drive 11 hours. Digital banking capabilities are not my issue. A systems approach is required, which is why we need these partnerships, why we need you in the room to make sure that you're thinking the what if. From a bank's perspective, we can only solve part of the challenge. And nothing makes me prouder working for an organisation that's committed to investment to make sure this inclusion does happen. So these three things are just part of it. They're things that do cause our people challenges: access, ability, and affordability. And I suspect these aren't just for First Nations peoples. So please know, again, with the respect, it happens to many. Access, telco network coverage, I don't know about you, but I live in the city and I still have problems with it. So can you imagine if you lived far, far remote, 11 hours, what their challenge would be? How do they get the services that they need? Whether it's health, education, financial, this is an opportunity. Device ownership, that's a privilege. My children are privileged they have more than one. I know what it's like when they lose one. Imagine if you didn't have one. And electricity access, the beautiful community you just saw does have electricity, but my experience and my knowledge knows that not all communities do. What do we do there? Ability, digital competence, English literature, scam safety. My people, some of them out there, English is their third or fourth language. Have we considered that? Scam safety. I run a call centre, which is a wonderful proposition for my people. 10% of those calls every week is to address scam and fraud. Again, you know the population. If you don't, we're a small minority of this country at the moment. That's a lot. Affordability. Living today is hard for all of us. It doesn't matter where you live or how much you earn, we've got challenges. But can you imagine if you don't have all the access? Data plans, are they the right thing? There's many stories that would question that for many of us. Are they right? And shared devices, it's such a common thing in our communities because of all those things I shared, but it is also one of the biggest challenges when you're trying to work with a service provider who requires you to have security on your device, where you need a password and only you can have the phone number. Some families share one phone for 20 members. So again, what if? What if we could understand how my people live and the way they want to live and how they've been here? It's the longest culture ever. Let's help them with this. So my key messages, I ask you to be bold in the influence that you've got. Be curious in the knowledge of my people and what we could do. Just imagine what if we could change some of these things. You will hear many Indigenous people say, we don't want a handout anymore. We want to work with you. We want a partnership. We want you to learn about us. And I believe if you and I can do that, the future for my young people will be what we're working hard towards. Thank you.
And look, I think it's a good example of building those partnerships where connectivity with something like Kuiper is just one piece of the puzzle that we really have here. Now, last up, because we're going to the home run here, I also want to look at some of the other examples that we see here in Australia and how we can use technology to help, for example, with biodiversity or bushfires. So it's my pleasure to introduce a panel with Tom Soderstrom, who's ex-NASA JPL and now the Director of Enterprise Strategy of AWS, Professor Carolyn Hogg from the University of Sydney, and Christopher Tyler, the Managing Director of Xe.ai. Please welcome them. Thanks for coming in. Let's have a seat. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good to see you. Yep, one more. There we go.
Almost took your chair.
Well, look, I think we talked a lot about our commitment that we do around improving the health of the planet, thinking about future generations. Tom, what are some of the examples that you see globally?
So some of the global examples, it's an exciting time. So as you mentioned, I was with NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and now I'm an enterprise strategist, so I talk to customers all across the world. And some of the exciting ones in space is, if I start way out and come back, in the universe, hopefully you've all following James Webb Space Telescope.
Yeah.
Finding the beginning of the universe, the Big Bang, and it's finding exoplanets, planets that one day, should we need to export humanity, will have a place to go. We already found 50 of those. Going closer to Mars, whoever thought we could fly a helicopter on Mars? It's actually impossible. Well, not anymore. It's done 60 flights, and now there's different ways, not just roving, but flying on planets.
Yeah.
Closer, the moon. We're going to send humans back to the moon, and we will have, it has a commercial rover with it, so you're seeing business and science and governments work together. And we have smart cities on Earth doing really well. Soon we will have on the moon and on Mars. And so how do we take all this amazing ingenuity and technology and put it back to where we really need it, which is on Earth? Some interesting use cases. We have a Finnish company called ICI that is tracking illegal fisheries, but it's also tracking wildfires and floods in Australia under contract from the government and in the US. Then we have, in the UK, we can measure energy escaping from buildings through a company called Satellite View in the city of Leeds. So they can now talk to the business owners and said, if you put some insulation in, you can save money. So business and public data for good is coming together.
Yeah.
And in Australia, we have the Blue Dot Observatory tracking 7,000 at-risk bodies of water for $100 a month.
Wow.
So you can have an impact using the cloud. And space is growing, and space is interesting. 10 new space agencies in the last few years, 5% cost of what it used to cost. And so it's going to be a fantastic opportunity for everybody here who wants to work in space.
Yeah.
So some exciting times ahead, including one use case here from Chris. That's awesome.
That's right.
Oh, thank you, Tom. Yeah, I'm from EXI.
Yeah.
EXI is a Latin word, and it stands for alarm, and that is exactly what the company does. We detect bushfires within a minute after they start, up to 10 minutes after they start, and notify the authorities or our customer immediately after the fire is detected. I'll give you a little bit of background. In 2019, I was in California for another project, and the office, which we had in Parisian Beach, were evacuated because of a bushfire approaching.
Yeah.
We were in the middle of designing our AI to detect the bushfires, and at the same time our office was evacuated. The power failure in California made it impossible for me to communicate with my office, which was empty anyway. So what, yeah, it's a funny story. Not so funny anymore, because what really shocked me, and that's why I'm so passionate about this, was when I came back and I saw what devastation the fires caused. It was devastation to the biodiversity, but it was also the suffering of the people. You know, you go to work in the morning and you come home at night and police doesn't let you go to your house anymore.
Yeah.
Now imagine you have a dog or a cat in there, completely impossible. You don't know is it fed or not. So what we did, we developed an artificial intelligence that gets fed in by camera data and by satellite data, and is analyzed by an artificial intelligence which runs in the AWS, and then send out a notification to the customer or to the fire department. Our AI is trained on 1.5 billion images. We have the biggest database for fire images, and we have processed about 500, half a billion satellite images in order to train the AI. And we do that because the devastation after fire for the biodiversity in the area, you can't imagine how many animals, I think it was billions of animals which died in the 2019 fires.
Yeah, yeah. And look, I like how you use AI there to really address that problem. And you mentioned biodiversity. I think that would be a good segue over to Carolyn, right?
3 billion animals died in those fires, just if you're looking for the figure. Yeah, so I work in biodiversity. I'm a conservation biologist speaking at a tech conference, which I always find quite entertaining. But why? And what is biodiversity? I mean, biodiversity is essentially all living things on the planet. And contrary to popular belief, humans are part of nature. We're not separate from the system. And it's made up of 3 things. It's made up of diversity of ecosystems, diversity of species, and genetic diversity, which is the area that I work in. Because we know that if a species has more inherent genetic diversity, it has a greater chance to adapt to a changing world. Unfortunately, though, we've seen about 40% of vertebrate species decline across the planet in the last 30 years, and about 40% of insect species have also declined in the same period of time. So there's many people who would have driven on holidays as a kid and remember having to scrape the bugs off the windscreen. Glass technology didn't get any better. We just lost the insects. And insects are really critically important because that's actually how they pollinate our food. Many people would like to eradicate mosquitoes. If you like chocolate, you can't eradicate mosquitoes because mosquitoes actually pollinate the cocoa plants. So what I do is we are mapping the genomes of a range of species in Australia. So the human genome was mapped back in 2003, and you think about how human medicine has changed since the 1990s to today. And that's really what we're trying to do for all eukaryotic life on Earth. It's a pretty ambitious target. And we produce lots and lots and lots of data. And lots of people think, well, you know, big animals have big strands of DNA and small animals have small strands. So humans have 3.2 billion pieces to their genome jigsaw puzzle. A corroboree frog, which is 2 centimetres in size, has 10.2 billion pieces to their genome. And so that's what we use cloud computing for, is the ability to expand and contract rapidly with the data that we generate. With the Tasmanian Devil program, we can now analyse 5,000 individuals in a matter of hours for $25, when we used to break the computer at the university quite regularly when we used to do it. So yeah, it really, the rapid expansion in technology has changed our ability to accelerate how we can learn more about biology on the planet.
Great. And talking a bit about technology, I mean, today's topic was a lot about artificial intelligence. Tom, do you think some of these technologies could be useful here?
No. No, I'm just kidding. I am really excited about 4 things. Generative AI, of course. Because imagine if you can, I mean, we talk about sustainability here. Yeah. Imagine if you can have a natural language conversation with all of the data across the world. Now, how do you do that? You need a lot of good data. Amazon has this open data sponsorship program. Yeah. It already has 100 petabytes of data. And by the way, that's a lot of data. Yeah. And it's distributing it to 10,000 users a month already. And some of that data is, for instance, Professor Carolyn's Australasia Genome Project for koalas. 70 terabytes to save 400 koalas, which is awesome. But what I was excited about, I'm Swedish, as it turns out. So Carolyn mentioned that there are Swedish researchers that jumped on the very next day and helped saving the koala. There are really no koalas in Sweden. So that's pretty cool. The second one, so generative AI is awesome. The second one is digital twins. Of course, everybody knows what digital twin is. Yeah. Well, maybe not. It's an exact digital copy of the physical system, but in the computer. So if you can imagine that you had access to all this data, and you could now build a digital twin of a city that reports the digital twin of a country and to entire continent, you could have government issue carbon penalties and carbon threat, perks.
Yeah, perks is a problem.
Yeah, perks is a better word. And it's quite amazing. Yeah. The third one, and by the way, if you have digital twin, you can start simulating in the digital twin, insert disasters that didn't actually really happen, use machine learning to mitigate thousands of what-if scenarios. It's a fantastic future. Yeah. And the third one is what I mentioned about space. Space is definitely open for business. It's going to be $1 trillion worth in 2040, according to estimates. So that's a fantastic opportunity for everyone here. Yeah. And we heard Kuiper. Everybody will get more brains across the world focusing on this problem. Yeah. And the last one is interesting use cases, interesting stories, and using generative AI to create them. So I highly recommend everybody tries out Party Rock. Go search for Party Rock and start playing. You don't need technical expertise, but you can see what generative AI can do.
Nice. And Chris, how about you? Where do you see this being relevant?
Yeah, it's actually a very good question, because if you look at the fire detection business, how it was done the last 50 years. You have a 40-meter-high fire tower. Someone is sitting up there with binoculars, and his job is 12 hours a day, turn around and look for fires. Now imagine you have 2 weeks and there's nothing going on. Yeah. You see always the same landscape. So now in AI doesn't get bored, and AI doesn't get distracted by a book, and AI doesn't have to climb down the tower to go to the toilet. It works 24/7 and analyzes the pictures captured by a camera, which turns around in the same way the fire tower operator turns around. The fire tower operator now can go in a control room, sit there, and when there's an alarm triggered by the AI, look at the screen and make a determination if there's a fire there, which has to be attended to immediately.
Yeah.
So absolutely, AI is helping us a lot, really a lot. We had some difficulties with space technology. We are not there yet. And I had a long discussion with Tom behind the scenes here, because the problem is the time from detection until it gets to the customer is still too long. There are not enough satellites up there. The data collected in the satellite cannot be transferred down as fast enough. One solution is, for example, edge computing, where we do the first analysis in the satellite itself, send it then to the AWS cloud, and then make an analysis and get an alarm to the customers.
Yeah, I like that kind of edge computing in the satellite, yeah.
And we've already extended AWS Cloud into space and done machine learning, so it's a perfect, we need those applications.
Kellen, how about yourself?
I wish biology followed physics rules. It would make life much easier. For us in the biological space, generative AI will help us be able to pull together threads of a large amount of information that is currently being produced. But will it be able to use predictive learning to predict what's happening? That's still out for question, because every time we think we know what's happening in a biological system, biology naturally throws you a curveball. But I have great hope for what we'll be able to do with the increase in data production and starting to look for commonalities through different data sets that we haven't been able to find before. The concern, on the other hand, though, is AI is very data hungry at the moment. And so what kind of impact is that going to have in the longer term as well?
Yeah. And look, I think we talked a lot about technology here. I mean, how about people, processes, anything that you want to ask or request from our audience here, business leaders?
Oh, I have an open floor. Excellent. I guess one thing I'd like everyone in the tech sector to really think about is technology is our friend. And unfortunately, the climate and biodiversity crisis we find ourselves living in is because of the way we embraced the technology of the first industrial revolution. And as Genevieve Bell said this morning, it's all about the choices that we make. And so if using AI is going to increase your productivity and profitability as a business, that's great. But if it also increases your impact, then you've reduced your business value. And I think the way moving forward, we really need to think about how do we use this awesome technology to increase productivity and profitability and reduce impact and become a more sustainable circular economy. The reality of the situation is the crises are here. They're not coming. It's not coming in the future anymore. We're currently living it. And so really it's about, do I do something or I do nothing? And there's been a huge release of a bunch of different frameworks around the world to help businesses understand their impact on nature and understand their impact on climate. Please use those tools. And then people always say to me, well, I'm only one person, or I'm only one business, or Australia is a small country. But you think about what Tom was saying. We put a rover on Mars. We put the Hubble telescope out at the edge of space. That was not achieved by one person. It is lots of small activities by lots of people making the effort, which allows us to have generated this amazing technology that we now live in today. And I think what you need to think about is history is going to judge all of us on the legacy that we leave. And you need to think about which legacy you want to leave behind.
Well, look, and I just love hearing all these stories here and how we can increase biodiversity, really try to combat wildfires, go all the way into space. So thanks to all of you for this wonderful panel. We're unfortunately a little bit out of time here, but thanks again for these stories, and I think you'll be around. So thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So 5 years ago, I said machine learning is the new normal. I'm going to leave you with 3 messages here and 3 predictions. I like to say AI is the new normal, and my 3 predictions are the following. The first one is humans with AI will outperform those without. I like to believe that natural language is the new programming language, and that we continue to embed AI potentially into physical objects, such as, for example, robots. And you know, as Karim Lakhani actually said in his Harvard Business Review 2024 here, AI is not going to replace humans, but humans with AI are going to replace humans without AI. And we already see that happening. I mean, think about some of the examples that I talked about earlier. If you're the person that uses the traditional search engine and you see a lot of links there and you got to click on them and find what you actually want to find there, or you use an AI-powered search engine, you're going to be a lot faster. You plan your next holiday. If you're a travel agent, things will change, because with Lonely Planet, the example that you heard yesterday, you now have an AI assistant that can plan your entire journey. And as a travel agent, I can now focus on the human aspects of actually providing these services. And look, it doesn't stop there. I mean, think about software engineering. If you are not using an AI assistant or coding companion right now, I truly urge you to do so. Not only will it help narrow the skills gap here, but it also allows me to do higher value tasks. I mean, I don't know about you, but look at that statistic here. I'm a software engineer myself. I hate writing code documentation. A really interesting task for an AI. I can do it really well. And it allows me to focus on higher value tasks. And that makes me believe that critical and analytical thinking will become even more crucial thanks to that generation AI that we have here. And look, I already mentioned it. I think natural language is that new kind of programming language. That doesn't mean that programming language is there to go away. But if I can use my natural language to potentially describe pieces of my code that are automatically being written by an artificial intelligence, then we drive a much more inclusive environment here where a lot more people can contribute to development of software. And look, lastly, I said we're going to continue to embed AI into many different products. I want to show you one of the things here that we do within Amazon with the agility robotics, where we basically embed artificial intelligence into humanoid robots, that go around and kind of pick up these boxes. And by the way, that's a really difficult task to do in robotics. Pick them up and bring them around. And even on the right-hand side here, you can see, of course, also equipped with computer vision to identify which is the right box. Here's the blue box, here's the green box, here's the red box. Put this in the right kind of spot. So that embedded artificial intelligence into robotics. And this is just the start. I think we will see a lot more. So with that, I want to leave you with one message. I think we really are already in that generation of artificial intelligence. It's a reality, and it helps us to be more productive, more creative, all across the board in every kind of industry. So don't fight it. Embrace AI. Thank you.